Good morning, Drew. How are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Connie, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am pretty excited to have you on here today. You and I have a lot of the same commonalities of things that we like, as far as diet, fitness, all these fun things. And so I'm excited to have you on here, bounce some things off of you, have you share your story with my audience, because it's a good one. And I really, I'm appreciative of the fact that you went the places you did. Which we're going to get to that story here pretty quick, in order to find understanding and common ground with people, which is a really amazing thing coming from another trainer. So anyhow, before we get too crazy, how about we just kick it off with who you are and what you're all about?
Yeah, so my name is Drew Manning, obviously. And what's funny is most people call me. I was just at an event last night and someone said, "Hey, are you the Fit2Fat2Fit guy?" So I'm so used to that now, but like people don't really know my name. It's Drew Manning. But yeah, Fit2Fat2Fit is what most people know me from. It's something I did back in 2011, which is crazy. It's been that long. But the idea I had back then, and this is coming from, back in the day, I was a personal trainer and I, at the time, had never been overweight. And so my whole life I was in shape. I grew up in a family of 11 brothers and sisters. We all played sports. Football and wrestling were the sports I played from a very young age. So for me, I was naturally fit. I was naturally active. And being in shape was something that came pretty easy for me because it was something I'd done my entire life. And so I became a personal trainer in 2009 and started training clients, and instantly there's a disconnect. I'm like, they would tell me excuses of why they couldn't just do the workouts I gave them and the meal plans that I gave them. They kept messing up and they kept eating the junk food that I told them not to, and they would skip workouts because they were sore and tired. And I'm like, you guys, why is it so hard for you just to do what I'm telling you to do? Like in my mind, it's so easy. Like you just do it, right? It's not that difficult. But for them, they would tell me, Drew, you don't understand how hard it is. Like I'm trying really hard, but it's so hard for me. I couldn't understand why it was so hard for them. And one of my clients, who was a brother-in-law at the time, said, "Dude, you don't understand how hard it is for people like me. Like for you, it's always been easy, and for me, it's just really hard, and it's always going to be hard." And I'm like, man. So I kind of took that to heart. I'm like, maybe there's something I need to learn as a trainer to gain a better understanding of what it's like to be overweight. And for me, this idea popped up in my head. Like, what if, what if you got fat on purpose, and what if they give you better understanding? And so for some reason that made sense in my mind, and I decided to embark on this journey where for 6 months I would stop exercising. I would eat an unrestricted diet to put on as much weight as I could, and then the next 6 months I would put my money where my mouth is and walk the walk and show people how to lose the weight. And so that's kind of my idea. That was my idea in a nutshell. I ended up gaining 75 pounds in those 6 months. It was one of the most humbling, hardest things I've ever done in my life because it was so much more of a mental and emotional journey for me. And that's where I learned the most valuable lessons, was on the mental and emotional side. And at the end of the day, I just realized how wrong I was in my approach to helping people with weight loss and transformation. Because in my mind, it was so simple. You just eat less, you work out, and it's not that hard. Until I went through it myself and was truly humbled. And so I learned a lot of valuable lessons along the way. And that's kind of me in a nutshell. We'll start there.
That's totally awesome. And talk about dedication. Gain a whole bunch of weight and have to lose it and go through that work. There's so many questions I have as far as this goes. First of all, was it hard for you to eat enough to gain that amount of weight in the first place? Or once you started getting addicted to some of the foods that you probably didn't eat before, was it easier just to continue on that path?
That's a good question. A lot of people think when I first started, they're like, you're probably not even going to be able to get fat. Like your genetics are what are keeping you in shape, and your body just won't probably even allow you to get fat. And obviously proved all those people wrong. Even myself, I was like, maybe I'll gain 50 or 60 pounds, but I ended up gaining 75. So it was surprising to me even how much weight I gained. It wasn't hard in the beginning. Actually, the first month was actually really fun. Like being able to go to the grocery store, skip the produce section, and just go down the cereal aisle, cookie aisle, chips. Like we have so much abundance and so many options here in America. It's like, why do we need hundreds of flavors of cereal? I don't know why, but it's amazing and it tastes really good. Like in the beginning, it was kind of fun, like a kid in a candy store type of feeling. And it was this false sense of freedom where like we think freedom is being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want, and eat whatever you want, right? But very quickly, about a month and a half, things started to change. I did not feel well. I started snoring at night. My energy levels were dipping. I was breathing heavy, walking up the stairs. And then that sense of freedom started to go away, because you're free to choose what you want, but you're not free from the to choose, or you're not free from those consequences that come from those choices. So it's freedom in a sense, but it's also a trap, because now those consequences of those choices you made, which you think are freedom, end up trapping you, and then you're not free because your health is starting to decline. And so for me, in the beginning, it was easy to eat those foods, but then the next 5 months is where the real mental and emotional struggle came in. And that's like I said, that's where I gained or learned the most valuable lessons.
Okay, so you totally stopped working out too for this 6-month period, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you can't really give us any biofeedback on how your body felt as far as you eating these foods and doing a workout, because you pulled that
Yeah.
away as well. So with that being said, when did you really start noticing a difference on how the foods were
Oh,
affecting you physically?
sorry about that.
You're fine.
Dogs are barking. Yeah. How long before I felt the foods affecting me physically?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it was about, like I said, a month and a half where I really felt it. Now, I did have digestive issues from the beginning. Like, my first meal was a dozen donuts. And so, or I tried to eat a dozen donuts. And obviously, after each of those feedings where I would eat these crazy amounts of food, I definitely struggled for the next few hours. But it didn't take a real toll until like a month and a half in, where, yeah, like I said, I snored at night, which affected my sleep, which affected my mood and my energy levels throughout the day, which affects your hormones and affects your personality. So I would say after that first month and a half is where things started to get really hard physically, mentally, emotionally, because it started to change everything about me. Everything. If you go and get my book, Fit2Fat2Fit, you go to chapter 4. I was married at the time. My wife, she has a chapter in there of what she went through and what her perspective was as we were going through this journey.
This takes some serious dedication. I can tell you that already because,
Yeah.
when you're into fitness and you're really into eating and all these things, I'm sure there was that aspect where you were super excited to start eating all these things that you wanted, and then backing off on your workouts, and you're probably like, hey, I can go do this instead or whatever. And then all of a sudden, probably that mental struggle, I know for me, comes in where you're like, dang, I just want to go to the gym right now. I want to like do something or eat some veggies or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's what the interesting part was for me. It was before, exercise was an outlet for me. That was my stress reliever. That was my therapy. Take that away, and now I had to cope with not having that. And so what was my substitute? It was food. And this is what happens to so many people. They fall into this trap where food becomes their comfort, becomes their therapy in a sense, because it does bring a temporary relief of, a relief of, pain or whatever you're feeling. And so it does kind of relieve that for, temporarily. But what it does is it traps you, because it creates this vicious cycle where it does help you temporarily, but then you feel so miserable afterwards that you need more food to then feel good again. So what happens is your blood sugar spikes, right? And you feel really good from that. You feel like, boost of energy. You feel good. You just ate, cinnamon toast crunch, or drink some Mountain Dew. You get this huge spike in blood sugar levels, and you get a huge crash afterwards. And then when that crash happens, and you don't have anything to replace it with, like if I would go without food for a couple hours, I would be miserable, like absolutely just feeling so sluggish, just down, depressed. And then you eat more food, and then guess what? You feel good again. And so it creates this vicious cycle where food became my therapy in a sense and replaced exercise. And that's where it gets dangerous for some people, where they have to find something else that's healthier for them as a distraction, because food is just this vicious cycle, and it's hard to get out of that. And that's what I realized. And that's why I was able to connect with my clients so much better going through this experiment, because that's where I could finally see, when my clients would tell me these things, I'm like, I get it now. The emotional connection to food is way more powerful than I ever imagined. It's not just about like, okay, having the willpower to put down the soda, put down the junk food. Someone that has the willpower and the discipline, that's been doing it for years or decades, it's so simple for them to say, look, it's so simple for me. It can be simple for you too if you just do it. But it's like going up to a drug addict and saying, hey, it's not that hard. Just stop doing drugs. Like, put down the drugs. Your life will be better. And why do you keep doing this to yourself, right? We know that drug addiction is real. Food addiction, we sweep under the rug, because food addiction is different, in my opinion. Food addiction is one of those things where, first of all, food is legal and we need it every single day. Like, we need it to eat it, right? It's in our face, marketed to us. And we see people eat it that don't get addicted to that food. So we see all these people eat these delicious foods, and they are not addicts, but some people are. And for them, they know they can't have that. And so it's different for food addicts. I feel like the world judges them differently than other addicts of other substances, but it does the same thing. It's the same mechanism in the body where food, drugs, alcohol, whatever the substance is a distraction to numb the pain that we're hiding, we've suffered. And at some point, it numbs that pain, or alcohol numbs that pain, or porn addiction, or whatever the addiction you want to put out there. Addiction is a cover up for some type of pain that we haven't dealt with yet. And we start that from a very young age, where we gravitate towards some substance to numb ourselves, distract ourselves. And that's what people really struggle with on the mental and emotional side, is some type of pain, trauma, challenge that they haven't really released yet. And until they do, and they become more self-aware of what that issue is and how to let it go, then it might be food one day, or it might be alcohol one day, or it might be another substance. There's always going to be these distractions, because we live in a high stimulus world where there's all kinds of things to distract ourselves, whether it's video games, whether it's TV, whether it's our phone, social media, all these substances that I mentioned, you name it. That's what people struggle with. And these are the lessons that I started to learn as I went throughout this journey. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so wrong. Like, I was so wrong when I tried to help people, like, hey, just eat this food and exercise like this. And, it's so easy, like, just do it and it'll save your life. And yes, in principle, in theory, it's simple, but it's not easy to apply.
Right.
Sorry, that
Right.
was a long rant.
No, I love it. I really love it. And when you say that, I understand it from all aspects, right? Like, I mean, that can even manifest itself in fitness. I mean,
Yeah, with exercise.
people with exercise addiction, people that are covering up a wound that they may not even know they're covering up
Yep.
via fitness. I know I personally found myself in that spiral a while back, and it was like, fortunately I had an event that kind of woke me up from it, but I understand how that could be something, and I see other people doing it too. And I always try to talk about that too, because we have addictions in many manners, and I've watched some people that have addictions that turn around and roll it into, say, a physique addiction with themselves, and then they just go down equally unhealthy journey, pathways that way. So anyway, yeah, I'm glad that you touched on that, and I understand fully. I mean, I rode my bike to work the other day, like 25 miles. Didn't have coffee before I before I did, and when I got to work, I forgot my debit card and I couldn't have coffee, and all day I was like, I just want to have some coffee.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
and I kept thinking about it, and I don't know why, because it's stupid, it's just coffee, but I'm addicted to it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it is
There's
what
all
it is.
kinds of addictions.
Yeah. So can you kind of tell my listeners a little bit about what your diet looked like
Sure.
prior to going on this journey of gaining weight and eating whatever you want?
Okay. Oh, so back in 2011, I was more of a paleo-ish type of person, high protein, moderate amount of carb, minimal fat, like lean meats, didn't eat a ton of fat, maybe some guac every once in a while, or avocado, but it was pretty clean, to be honest with you. But it was 6 or 7 small meals per day throughout the day, every single day, high protein at every single meal, a lot of lean meats, and that's kind of it worked for me. And as far as my physique goes, and maintaining a good amount of lean muscle mass and being strong and being fit and being healthy. And then obviously I ate things like white bread, white pasta, juices, granola bars, chips, cookies, crackers, sugary cereals like Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Hot Pockets, lots of soda. Let's see what else, SpaghettiOs, mac and cheese, top ramen, those types of foods, right?
Yeah.
Throughout my journey of gaining weight. And then on the way back, it was a similar approach, where it was more of a paleo-ish approach, 5 small meals per day. And that's what I taught people, because that was like that was mainstream back then. Keto wasn't really around, or well known in 2011, 2012. And so that's kind of what my history of nutrition looked like, back in the day, from before Fit2Fat2Fit, during Fit2Fat2Fit, and then losing it back to fit. That was kind of my approach.
So as you gained this weight, how did your feelings about yourself become? Did,
Mm.
like, I'm sure there had to be this point where you started to be like, oh, my stuff doesn't fit. Oh, I don't, how about your peers around you? How did they feel about it? I mean, I'm sure some of your close friends knew you were maybe running an experiment, but
Yeah.
people that didn't, I mean, how did you feel about that?
So that's a really interesting question. And this is kind of what I was talking about where it started affecting me on the mental and emotional side. So here's the thing. When you grow up your entire life in shape like I did, you identify your self-image as your body image. So your body is you, right? So like I was Drew the fit guy. That was my identity my whole life because that's all I've ever been. And so people who, same thing, if they grew up overweight, they attach their self-image with their body image, thinking I am so and so the overweight person, right? And that just kind of becomes their identity. So what happened for me was when I went out and gained the weight, I totally freaked out. And I had this loss of identity crisis because I wanted to go up to strangers in public and say, hey, I'm not really overweight. This is just an experiment. Here's my before picture. Like, go to this website. It'll explain everything because this isn't me. I was so uncomfortable, so self-conscious that I cared so much about what other people thought of me. Like, I wanted to explain to people what I was doing so they wouldn't judge me because I felt judged in certain social situations, and I was so uncomfortable in those situations where I felt like I had to explain to people like I'm not really overweight. And so there were times where a lot of people knew what I was doing, but there was other people sometimes where like they didn't know about it, and they told me later, they talked behind my back like, what is going on with Drew? Is he going through a divorce, a midlife crisis? Like, and they would tell me it because I was working in the medical field at this time, and I remember some doctors and nurses that kind of knew me that would see me come in and they'd be like, "Is that the same guy?" Like that can't be like, and so they were really shocked. But when I explained to them what I was doing, they're like, "Oh my gosh, okay, that makes perfect sense," because I had no idea. Like I saw you, and it was crazy. But like the other part was going out in public. Like I said, was really really hard for me because of my identity. My identity was based on being Drew the fit guy, and there was a couple moments. One moment that I really remember very clearly where I was at the grocery store. I had my shopping cart full of all this junk food, right? And behind me in line, checking out, were these three women, and I could just feel the judgment and the stares of them looking at my big belly and all this junk food, like excessive amounts. It wasn't like a couple granola bars. It was like cereal, soda, chips, granola bars, like all these unhealthy foods that I was eating. And I wanted to say something so bad to them, like, hey ladies, I normally eat spinach and kale and broccoli, and like I'm normally a healthy fit guy, but like what's happening is this experiment I'm doing. But in that moment, that time, I didn't say anything. I didn't talk to them. I just kind of let that feeling of judgment sink in. Whether they were judging me or not, I don't know. I don't know if they were, but in my mind, I felt judged, and this is what hit me in that moment where it clicked for me. This is what my clients have to go through on a daily basis, where someone sees them, is looking at them, and maybe that client feels judged in that moment because they know what that person's thinking, or they think they know what that person's thinking, and it's hard. And for me, I only got to experience a small percentage of what someone who's overweight like goes through, but it really hit home for me. It was really powerful because I didn't say anything. I just let it sink in. I'm like, man, it helped me develop empathy for those that struggle, for those that are judged and looked at as and labeled as lazy or less than because of their weight. And so many people are so harsh in our society because we put so much value on our outward appearance. We put so much value on being skinny and being fit, and if you're not, there's something wrong with you, or you're lazy, or you're looked down upon in society, and it's unfair, and it's a lot of misunderstanding. And so it really helped me to develop empathy for those that struggle with transformation and weight loss, because I get it. I have so much of a better understanding now, having done this experiment.
Okay, I love so many things that you said right there. Hopefully, I don't lose my train of thought because
Sure, no worries.
as you were speaking, I was adding cars to that train because I was like, wow. I side with you on so many levels in this because I personally was pretty overweight my whole life. I've
Mhm.
always lifted, but I always thought, if you lift weights, then you're gonna lose weight and look like a beach body babe or something like that, or a Baywatch babe. And
Yeah,
yet I would work out constantly, and I never trimmed up. I never looked the way I thought I should look. I was not one
yeah.
of those girls in high school that was like all pretty and whatnot. I was strong, but
Yeah.
and then I got out of lifting. But and then that's when I started. I mean, my husband and I raced motocross for a really long time, and so we were always in really good shape. We were active, but I was always overweight. Uh,
Yeah.
and so when I finally did get a handle on my weight situation and started to get really jacked, I almost had this extreme fear of ever going back to that place, and I still do. And I totally understand where you're at, because then all of a sudden my identity became, oh, there's Connie, she was once really big and now she's a bodybuilding athlete and shredded and amazing, and everybody's like enamored with the fact that she was able to do that to herself and wants to know her secrets and all these things. And
Yeah.
then I get done bodybuilding and I had a pretty bad health crisis, because I pushed it way too hard with that.
Yeah.
And at that point I started to gain a lot of weight really
Mm,
fast, which I'm
yeah.
already prone to, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
all of a sudden the identity crisis was insane. It was like, I totally understand what you're talking about when you talk about wanting to make excuses for yourself, because I wanted to be like, oh well, I normally look like this, here's a picture, and
Yeah.
show people those things and make all these excuses for why I look the way I do. And it took me a lot to kind of put myself in this mental place of, well, hey, you are healing, you're recovering, you've got a lot of things on your plate. Not everybody needs to know about this. You just need to keep doing you and heal you and stop worrying about everybody else. And that was a really hard thing to grasp. And after about a year and a half, I'm still coming to those terms. I was just thinking yesterday on my bicycle, I was like, man, I've made it a long way in the last year mentally, about
Yeah.
how my identity was and why I needed to back my identity with the fact that I was an elite athlete and I was jacked all the time, and now I'm not. And I may never look that way again, and it's fine. It's
Yeah.
good.
It's beautiful to hear your story and to see the evolve, like how you've evolved with your self-awareness and learning to let go of that. I think that's what so many people need to learn how to do over time is, it's not going to happen overnight where you just all of a sudden, hey, you know what? I'm going to stop caring what other people think. Like I wish it happened that simple. But as you build your self-awareness, you realize that you are more than your body, that your body is temporary. Your body can change, it can morph, you can have a baby, you can gain weight and lose weight like I have, you can be a bodybuilder, you can be an endurance athlete. Like your body can do these amazing things. The problem is that at some point in time, we've bought into this myth that we are only valued if we look a certain way because probably based off experience, someone was mean to you or picked on you because of the way you looked and the way your body was. And like society has defined you by your body. And at some point, you've bought into that myth and that lie, thinking, okay, well, once I get skinny, once I get fit, then everyone's going to love me, and then all my problems will go away, and then I'll love myself, right? And then other people will love me. But I promise you that if you wait until that day, it's not what it's cracked out to be. It's not. If that were the truth, everyone that has a six pack, that has a perfect body, from society standards, they would be happy. They wouldn't be miserable. They would still, they would love themselves. And a lot of people we both know in this industry, it's not true. They still pick themselves apart. They still hate themselves because it has to change from within. Your view of your body you have to develop that better relationship with your body from within and learn to be happy where you are now and realize that your body is temporary. You can change it up however you want to, if you really want to be dedicated to that. But it's a journey of learning how to build that self-awareness to let go of that attachment to your body image as your self-image. And so I think that's the biggest key for anyone that's on a fitness journey is asking yourself, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to lose weight, get fit? And what I've learned over the years and what I try and teach my clients is if you could get people to shift their perception of what success looks like in the health and fitness industry and help them fall in love with the process of treating your body kindly, treating your body with love, which means healthy, real food, eating healthy, real food that makes you feel good, makes your body feel good, and then moving your body in a way that feels good to you. That, like, whether that's strong, whether that's dancing, whether that's yoga and flexibility or strength, whatever you want it to be, find that for you. And then what happens when you fall in love with the process, you see that those results take care of themselves over time. Instead, you're so focused on results that you'll put up with the process for a certain period of time until it gets too hard. And you're like, man, I'm doing so much effort in the process, but I'm not seeing the results. So therefore it's not worth it. Why even try? Why even like exercise and eat healthy? Because I feel miserable. I'm starving all the time. I'm like sore all the time. And I see like, 1 pound loss on the scale. That's not worth it. Right. And so that's what I'm saying is like, ask yourself, why do you want this? And if you could flip your perception and just do the process because you're worth it, because you love yourself enough to do the process and don't care so much about the results, let the results take care of themselves over time. I promise you, if you could do that, if you could do that shift in mindset, you'll be so much happier with who you are. You'll be more grateful for where you're at now, even though it's not perfect, even though you don't have the perfect Instagram model body. I promise you, you'll be so much happier with who you are on the inside as you work on the better version of yourself, on the outside by treating yourself kinder and nicer by feeding your body real food and exercising. So that's kind of my 2 cents when it comes to helping people shift their perception. And the problem is our society is so addicted to the diet mentality of like, what's the best diet out there, the quickest way to lose the most amount of weight in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of effort. Like what can I do that's the least effort to get the body I want? Like I get that, but shift your perception. Just treat your body, operate out of a place of self-love versus self-hate, and see how that goes for you, because you've been doing the opposite your whole life. Why not try something different, you know?
Absolutely. And it's really become, I feel like it's even blown up further with the social media stuff. There's so many great things about social media, but there's also so many dark things about it. And I feel like you are not making progress is what it's made out to be in the fitness industry, right? You're not making progress if you're not
Mhm.
losing weight. And so everything
Yeah,
just comes down to that scale, which is so unfortunate because when you have people that are actually making progress, yet that scale's not changing, they feel like a failure when that's not the case. There's so many other things to base your success off of besides the scale.
100%. I think the scale is a huge trap, and it's such a weird thing that we have. If you think about it from an outside perspective, it's your relationship with gravity. Like you, yeah, that's what the scale measures, is your relationship with gravity at that moment in time. And if you measure it an hour later, 2 hours later, it's not going to be the same. It's always fluctuating. And so to place so much value and importance on your relationship with gravity honestly makes no sense, in my opinion. There's so many other ways to show progress, and some of those are taking measurements, right? So measuring tape, how your clothes fit, how you look in the mirror naked, how you feel, getting your blood work done, getting your body fat tested. These types of things are way more important, way more telling of if you're actually making progress, because the scale fluctuates so much throughout the day. You know, a lot of it is due to water retention or water loss, the weight gain and weight loss. And you don't know, the goal really isn't weight loss, it's fat loss. You don't want weight loss if you end up, you know, losing lean body mass. You want to lose fat mass and hold on to that lean mass to keep your metabolism up, and that's what will make you look better naked. So you just have to shift people's perception of what success looks like, and it's not on the scale, I promise you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So back to your journey, you gain
hmm
this as you're gaining this weight. Like, I have a question. How was your sleep? Like you said, you started to snore. Did you feel like tired all day, like from not sleeping well? Like, how did this work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I had, I have a Whoop app now, or a Whoop strap that I use to monitor my sleep. I didn't have this back in the day. It would be cool to kind of measure it, to see how it affected my sleep really. But I just know from, you know, my wife at the time was like, yeah, you snored a lot. And I know that waking up exhausted every day affected my sleep. So I know for sure my sleep was not as efficient as it normally is,
Gotcha. I was just curious because I know food can substantially affect people's
for
sleep, and
sure.
so I was just curious what your feedback was on that. So you gain the weight. It's 6 months is up, and it's time to start trimming back down again. How was that getting back into the game?
Yeah, so this was the other really important lesson that I learned, and that was the emotion, how powerful the emotional connection to food really is. So I did cold turkey, where I went one day having all that junk food that I mentioned, and then the next day 2,000 calories of real whole food. And those first 2 weeks were hell. It was miserable the way I felt, um, because my body was so addicted to those highs that it got from those foods, and now all of a sudden there was no more of that drug, and it went through these withdrawal symptoms. And man, I was grumpy, I was moody, I had headaches, I was starving all the time. The food didn't taste nearly as good as I remember. And I was like, man, this sucks so bad. Why does your body fight against you and make you want to eat those foods again, even though I'm feeding it real nutritious food that it should want? But this is where it clicked for me. Man, this is what my clients have been telling me, and I just didn't listen to them. Couldn't understand. I'm like, dude, just put down the junk food. It's not that hard. Like, just do it, and you'll feel better. But I didn't realize how powerful that emotional connection to food, and from a biological perspective too, your body craves these foods because they're, in a sense, like drugs, where you get these highs from them. And now I wasn't feeding my body that anymore, and it was miserable for the first 2 weeks, and I couldn't believe how hard it was. I remember being vocal about it, speaking out about it, and people were like, yes, thank you so much for validating my feelings, because here I was, a personal trainer, admitting how hard it truly was for someone like me to try and make that switch cold turkey. And now I have so much more empathy for those that struggle, because I understand that emotional connection to food so much better now, having done this journey. Because before I'm like, dude, it's not that hard. Just put the junk food down and go to the gym. Like, come on, like, really, it's not that hard. And now having lived it, even for 6 months, I'm not going to say like I know exactly what it's like, right? Because it's not exactly the same as someone who's grown up overweight. But I know for me, it was an eye opener, and it really humbled me. And so those first 2 weeks were really, really hard. They were literally hell. And then your body adjusts. That's the amazing thing, is your body eventually will adjust. I promise you, if you can get through that first transitionary phase where it sucks, it's hard. Yes, you don't feel great. But if you just have someone to hold your hand and pull you through it and just realize it's going to get better, it's going to get easier, your body will adjust. It did get better. My cravings became more manageable. I started to feel good again, had more energy. The food started to taste better. I'm like, okay, this is what happens. Okay, so it's a slow process. It's not like instantaneous like we want it to be. And so that was the first phase of my journey back to fit. And then I actually skipped exercise the first 30 days. I wanted to show people the power of nutrition first and how important that is, because I think some people think, oh, if I just exercise hard enough, I could eat whatever I want. But I want to show people, if you could just be consistent with your nutrition, you'll see way better results from that than you would staying consistent with exercise. And so for me, that was the biggest thing in showing people, was the power of nutrition. So I lost, I want to say, a little over 20 pounds those first, or around 20 pounds the first 30 days with no exercise. My blood work went back to normal, which was great and amazing that my blood work was back in the green already after 30 days. It shows your body is resilient if you treat it nicely, consistently. And then the next 5 months, I eventually had to go back to the gym. I did have to go back, and that was humbling as well, going back as an overweight person for the first time, because the judgment kicked in, the self-consciousness kicked in. But I was like, what, this is gonna be this long, slow journey. Like, I wanted to have my six pack and my strength back and my endurance back that first day, but I was truly humbled, being able to do push-ups and pull-ups and little things that were so simple to me before were so hard and so difficult, because I was in a new body now. And it really helped me, like I said, build empathy for those that struggle. I'm like, man, I get what you're talking about now, because I've been there. And luckily, I got back to fit, to make a long story short. But it was one of the hardest things I've ever been through. And what I compare it to is being on top of this mountain my whole life. All the personal trainers out there, the fitness influencers that have never been overweight, they've never struggled, they're on top of this mountain. And everyone at the bottom is trying to get to the top, right? All my clients, people who are overweight, they want to get to the top too, because they want to look like that. And so from the top, as personal trainers, it's so easy for us to yell down at our clients saying, look, it's so simple, just do this. Like, it's not that hard. Like, keep pushing yourself, right? We're motivating them from the top, telling them it's so easy. But then for me, for the first time coming down off that mountain, starting at the bottom, was a whole new perspective looking up. And that journey up was way harder than I ever imagined. And it definitely gave me some insight and, like I said, empathy and a better understanding for those that struggle to make it to the top. I have a better understanding now, and I get why it's so hard for people, especially on the mental and emotional side. It's not as simple as just like eating less and working out. And that's what this whole journey taught me. And that's why I'm grateful I did it and have no regrets.
Well, I'm so happy that you decided to do it and that you can, empathize with people that are struggling, and also anybody else that's out there. By you telling your story and all these things, you're telling people, hey, I want to learn about this stuff, which is really awesome. I want to backtrack just a minute. You were talking about your blood work. So you did get your
Mhm.
blood work done pre and post weight gain.
Yeah.
How much did your weight gain and the diet you were eating affect your blood work, your
It
hormones, all of that?
Yeah, it affected it quite a bit. I don't have all the numbers memorized anymore. I used to back in the day, but some of the numbers that stick out that I remember, first of all my lipids were in the red, obviously, like HDL, LDL, triglycerides, fasting glucose, all that was in the red for sure. Hormones I remember my testosterone numbers, and my testosterone numbers dropped to the low 200s as a 31-year-old male. It was crazy how low it was, at my heaviest. And after those first 30 days of just switching my diet, no exercise, it more than doubled in those first 30 days. So it went up to 450, I think, after the first 30 days of just eating healthy again, which was amazing. And my blood pressure, I remember getting up to 167 over 113 at the highest that I measured it, which was scary, right? It was definitely hard for my doctor to kind of see that and not prescribe me some medicine, and of course, which I said no, I don't want it. But anyways, uh those are the ones that I remember, the numbers that I remember.
Right. And not to get onto a personal note with this, but you probably
Mhm.
know where I'm going. Like, I'm sure your libido suffered from that. Uh like, and I just think of like the standard American you see walking around, these men that need help in order to have libido and do all these things, and then what they're eating and what their body profile looks like. And it makes me think we have a lot of problems with all sorts of things that probably are all linked back to our diet and our health overall.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to show people. And like I said, if you go read chapter 4 of my book, my wife talks about our sex life or lack of sex life during this journey. And yeah, libido definitely took a hit for sure. And that's the thing I wanted to show people is like the correlation between unhealthy lifestyle and choices, nutrition, sleep, exercise, and how that affects your sexual health. Because people think, oh, well, it's just my age, and I just need to take this blue pill, and everything will be fixed. It's like, no, the underlying condition is inflammation in the body, and that is due to certain lifestyle choices. The junk food you're eating all the time, the lack of sleep you're getting, all the stimulus you're taking throughout the day, lack of exercise and movement throughout with your body affects your sexual health as well. And so it's not just as simple as like, oh, just take this blue pill and like fix everything. It's like, no, if you just fix these things, you wouldn't need that at all. So anyways, that was another interesting part of the journey.
Yeah, and all of these health conditions and things, they kind of hold hands together, right? So when you start to narrow down one, then you help fix another in a sense. And it's just crazy how much all of these things are totally linked together, and how a lot of them can be severely helped with nutrition and
Yeah.
exercise. So yeah, that's awesome. So let's switch gears a little, because you stated at one point that you were in more of a paleo style diet, which it sounds like you picked that up coming back out of your weight gain journey to your weight
Mhm.
loss journey. At what point did you decide that you wanted to start experimenting with the ketogenic diet?
That was around 5 years ago, where I stumbled upon it after listening to Tim Ferriss interview Dr. Dominic D'Agostino on his podcast. And I learned so much more about the scientific research that had been done on the ketogenic diet outside of weight loss and fat loss. Things like brain toxicity, traumatic brain injuries, epilepsy, seizures, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, all these other therapeutic applications of the diet. I was so amazed that there's so much research that had been done on a ketogenic diet for those purposes. It definitely intrigued me more to experiment with it. And this is before there were programs or a lot of books about it. And so it was about 5 years ago that I stumbled upon it, did my own experiment, fell in love with it. I loved the mental clarity I received from it. I wasn't a slave to food anymore. So instead of 5 or 6 meals a day, it was 1 or 2 meals a day. My brain was sharper. My digestion was better because I wasn't having to digest food all day long. Um, and like I said, the mental clarity was through the roof. I love the way my brain felt on keto. And so that's why I definitely started to research it more and pursue it more. Went on the Dr. Oz show, talking about the benefits of it, and then wrote my first program. And then from there, helped out a lot of people with doing the ketogenic diet. Then I wrote my second book called Complete Keto. And that's where I've kind of became a huge proponent of the ketogenic diet for all kinds of purposes. Weight loss and fat loss, every diet works for weight loss and fat loss. Like as long as you are in a calorie deficit, for sure. But the thing I like about keto as one of our tools in our tool belt is a lot of reasons. Like I said, the mental clarity, I feel like that is like a game changer for so many people, because people come for the weight loss and fat loss because it's a diet, or at least some people treat it that way, but then they stay because of the mental clarity that they receive, and like they're not a slave to food anymore. They could go all day long, and fast, and it's not a huge deal. They're not going to die and suffer from being hangry all the time. Keto makes that a little bit easier, in my opinion, from my experience. And so that's kind of why I'm a huge fan of the keto diet. But like I said, when it comes to weight loss and fat loss, a lot of diets work.
Yeah, and I think there's different modalities people can
Hmm.
use in order to lose weight, and if adhered to, they're all going to be successful, right? I know with myself, I was a keto naysayer, not 100%, but because of the
Hmm.
way I saw people were using it, I saw people eating keto bagels and keto bars and all this junk, and it's still processed crap, in
Yeah.
my opinion. And so
Yeah.
that kind of put a bad taste in my mouth for the keto movement initially. Also, just coming from a background of the bodybuilding stuff, they're like, you're gonna lose your gains if you go keto, like, and so I kind of had a little bit of that ingrained in myself as well. However, when I started to go through my recent demise, I was looking for anything that I could to try to, in order to get my hormones back in order and kind of regain my health. And I was like, well, after listening to the same thing, to Dom D'Agostino and a lot of other experts out there on the ketogenic diet, I was like, I think I really need this to reset my body, reset my hormones, and I'm going to give it a try.
Yep.
So I implemented it and I started to find some things that were super interesting. Like you said, the mental clarity. And I've never been a person that's been eating a whole bunch of packaged junk. I've been
Sure.
mostly paleo as
Mm-hmm.
well. And I just was all about that. But I started the ketogenic diet. Mental clarity was a big thing. My digestion and bloating and all that stuff got
Yeah.
way better, because I was still in the factory thinking of like 5 meals a day type of thing, even if it was
Mm-hmm.
paleo. My
Yeah.
digestion got way better. No more bloating, no more gas. Gas was a
Yeah.
bad factor in my world. And yeah, and so basically my digestion got better. And then the one thing I started noticing, I started incorporating some intermittent fasting. I've kind of switched gears with my training. I needed to mentally do that. And so I started doing some distance cycling. And in the process of that, I noticed the longer I was fasted and the more ketosis I was in, I didn't build lactic acid.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, the big winner popped out with the ketogenic diet for me, because I hate lactic acid. Who loves that? And I
Exactly.
noticed my legs can just go forever and they feel great when I'm totally in ketosis and if I'm fasted. And I'm like, whoa, my mind is blown. I started reaching out to other fat adapted endurance athletes and I was like, whoa. And then I start doing the research on this and I'm like, oh my gosh, glucose is dirty fuel. You have terrible byproducts after you get rid of that, right? So my brain and my mind was totally expanded at that point to where I was like, okay, this can be used on so many levels. Maybe ketosis and keto is not right for everybody, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
but I think everybody should give it a try and at least give their body that opportunity to be metabolically flexible and use two fuel sources.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's how most humans were, or all humans were designed to be metabolically flexible, and just most of us have never really given ketosis a chance. We never really, unless you fasted on purpose, which most people don't do, or done the ketogenic diet, which a lot of people haven't before. So it's worth at least exploring to see how your body feels in it. The problem I see is people will do it for a week or so and be like, that's not for me. Like, you got to give your body minimum 30 days. I would say upwards of 60 to 90 days of being consistent in a ketogenic state to see if it's right for you. Because your body does need time to adjust. It does need time to adapt and become efficient at using ketones as its primary fuel source instead of glucose. And for some people, like, you got to take maybe not a week or two off of training, but you got to lower the intensity in the beginning, because people like CrossFitters or people that do glycolytic sports are like, oh man, I just crash. And I'm like, yes, that's your body adjusting. It's not used to using ketones yet. It's going to take some time. So be patient with yourself as you transition. But anyways, yeah, I think it's definitely worth at least giving it a shot. Do your research first. Don't just jump in eating butter, bacon, and cheese all day long and thinking like you're doing keto, right? There's so many things you need to understand about the ketogenic diet, what happens inside the body when you switch over to a high fat, moderate protein, low carb diet. You got to understand what to expect instead of just jumping into it, eating like, low quality keto food. That's, yes, keto, but if you want to do it for optimal performance, you got to do some research first.
Right. And I love that you brought up the amount of macros kind of nutrient there, because I think
Yeah.
that that's another pitfall people fall into. I know I myself was one of them when I initially tried to do the ketogenic diet. I was doing way too much protein, and so I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't getting into ketosis. So it took me a long time to get into ketosis. And now, like after being there for quite some time, if I do go out and have a carb meal, I notice that I can jump back into ketosis relatively fast. It only takes me a day or two. I'll jump out of that carb meal and go into a fast, and then boom,
Yep.
I'm pop right back into ketosis, which is funny because before my body was like, oh hell no, I'm not going there.
Yeah.
And now it's just like, oh, that's where I gotta go. Okay, cool, sounds good.
Yeah.
So it's really, really interesting how that works. And so it's nice talking with other people that are super athletic that are doing it and it's working for them.
Yep, exactly. And I've done all different types of applications from CrossFit to just recently running 100 miles, in a ketogenic state and using both carbs and ketones as a fuel source for certain events, right? It just depends on what I'm doing. But once you learn how to use both sources of fuel, you can pretty much do anything in this world, as far as performance goes.
So let's talk about that. I'm personally moving into the endurance space, and I was curious, like, for your 100-mile race, obviously there's a lot of naysayers out there saying that if you are fat adapted, that you're going to have a harder time utilizing carbs if you need to for something.
Mhm.
So for your 100-miler, what did the preparation nutritionally look like as far as getting ready for that and making sure you have enough fuel on board in order to make that happen?
Yeah, so training leading up to it, I would stay mostly keto, but I would say it was more of a cyclical ketogenic diet. And on my long run days, right? Because usually for training for the 100 miler, there's 2 long run days. I would always train in a fasted state. So my body became very efficient at being fat adapted and using ketones as its main fuel source when there was no food in my system and I had to run for 3 or 4 hours, right? Very slow pace. I wasn't going super fast, right? It was, for me, it was like a nice, easy pace that I could maintain for 3 or 4 hours. And that's kind of what I did leading up to the race. Now, on race day and the night before race day, I did add in some healthy carbs, things like potatoes and sweet potatoes, a little bit of rice. And then the day of the race, what I did was I supplemented with exogenous ketones. And then I did take in some glucose throughout the journey because this is what I've learned from people like Zach Bitter, who's the world record holder for the 100 miler on a track and on a treadmill, which he broke recently. He taught me, using both glucose and ketones in during the race is a great way to fuel you, throughout. So every hour or so, I would take in, and I couldn't take in a lot of glucose or any food at all, to be honest with you, because just what I was doing, I felt nauseous if I ate too much. So I maybe ate 1,000, maybe 2,000 calories at the most during my 24-hour run. And every hour I'd stop, get some food, and then take a sip of ketone esters, which are
Hmm.
very powerful supplements. They're kind of expensive. They're cheaper than what they used to be. I use Ketone Aid, which is a good company that makes a good high quality ketone ester, and I would supplement with that and some glucose, every hour. And that's what kept my performance and my pace sustainable throughout the 24 hours. Like I didn't slow it down a whole lot, um, and I was able to complete my 100 miles in 24 hours. That's it in a nutshell. There's more to it. I did a whole podcast on my exact protocol, but that's kind of what I did in a nutshell. And for me, like I don't. Here's the thing. I learned from last year doing my 100 miler. Last year, I brought maybe 5 different types of foods to fuel me during the 100 miler, and I only accomplished 80 miles in 24 hours. So I didn't finish the 100 miles, but I was still proud of myself for doing 80. But what I learned was, man, I got so sick of those foods to where the last 5 hours, I was like, nothing sounds good. I'm not touching any of this food. So I stopped eating completely. And that's where I felt like I crashed. This year, I just brought all different types of foods just in case. So I'm talking about gummy bears, M&Ms, peanut butter sandwiches, watermelon, bananas, apples, like anything you could think of that was a different texture, different flavors, because I felt like if I need something. And if I'm like feeling nauseous or sick and like I'm done with watermelon or I'm done with bananas, like I need something. So like rotating through those different sources of glucose really helped me because there were times where I got so sick of food, but I know I needed something, and switching up the texture and the flavors really helped my palate just to be able to get some food down. Because if I didn't, I felt like I probably would have crashed again.
Yeah, and I'm curious about all this because there's a lot of different athletes out there that are fat adapted that have all sorts of different modalities. Now, I'm glad you brought up the ketone aid because I recently started implementing that into my training as well. And
Hmm.
my regular friends that are like super sugar burners, they're like, what? Like, I'm like, you should try this. And they're like, I'm not in ketosis. I don't do keto. I don't need this. And I'm thinking, no, like, this is double whammy when you've got
Yeah.
glycogen and ketones on board. Like, you can really supplement your training with this.
Yes.
And so I recently started bringing them on board. I haven't told anybody yet, so I guess it's going to come out when this podcast comes out. But I'm actually training for a 120-mile endurance bicycle race right now,
Nice.
and I'm trying to decide on how I want to go about my nutrition. I'm coaching myself for it. I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm good at the coaching myself part, but I'm pretty good at deciding to do things without outside influence. And I'm like, okay, so what do I want to do here with my food? Like, I'm still making a decision because I perform the best fasted, but obviously I'm not going to, go 8 hours fasted,
Yeah,
burning that kind of calories. So
for
that's the
sure.
point where I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to keep it ketogenic and keep the lactic acid down? Am I going to pull in some glucose and have to struggle with that a little bit?
Yeah.
I can't decide. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, my husband and I are driving back from my long ride today, and I was like, maybe I should put bacon in there. It's high in
Yeah.
sodium and fat. I mean,
Yeah.
heck, but my brain's like trying to wrap myself around this and go, how do
Yeah.
I want to do this? It's always a crapshoot.
Yeah, it's different for each person too. It's very individual. Like what works for Zach Bitter doesn't work for every other person. And like I had another friend, Michael McKnight, who did a 100-mile run with no food in under 19 hours. Like that was amazing. He's an ultra endurance athlete. He's definitely crazy, but he's amazing. He did it with no food. And so I'm like, okay, that worked for him. I don't know if I'll be able to go the whole time. I went the first 20 miles without any food on my 100-miler. And then from there started incorporating food. So what you could do is just train in a fat adapted state where you're fasting, go as long as you can, and then maybe before race day, like a month before, test it out. Do something. Maybe if you're going to be running for 8 hours, maybe do a 5-6 hour ride or something to kind of see what it feels like. Go as long as you can without any food, and then bring both glucose and ketones and kind of see what how you feel adding in some of those fuels for the last maybe 3 hours or so of the race. Like, okay, maybe the first 5 hours I can get through, but the last 3 hours I'm going to need some type of calories, some type of food. So I'll bring in XYZ foods and see how my body handles them and find that combination that works best for you. That's what I did,
Mm-hmm.
at least, and that's why I was like, all right. So on race day, I'm going to add in these foods that I never really eat, obviously, but like I was like, for performance, I need to get through this race, and so I'm going to have everything just in case. And then from if I'm feeling like I'm crashing, like what happened on mile 20 was I felt heat exhaustion kick in, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to crash if I don't get something in me that's going to help fuel me through the hottest part of the day. Because here in Utah, it was like 90, mid 90s, no shade, super hot, and I was starting to get those heat exhaustion, heat stroke symptoms, where I was getting dizzy, lightheaded, nauseous, and I was like, I can't fail at this. So that mile 20, I was like, I need something. So that's where I just chugged a bunch of watermelon juice, ate some watermelon. I was like, oh my gosh, that felt so good. And then the next hour, I was like, man, I feel really good. And so every hour, I was like, all right, I'm just going to supplement with something, and I just need enough to get me by for the next hour.
Yeah, and I guess that's another part about this is when you're doing things like that is like you're not used to accustomed to like eating some of these things and you're like, okay, I'm going to try it. That's like, okay, what's my body's response? What's the feedback I'm going to get from that if it's something that maybe I don't agree with?
Yeah, you definitely test it out first. Like test
Yeah.
it out in your training. Okay, like I picked things I knew my body would handle well, like Pop Tarts. Not huge amounts. These are just like a few bites. Peanut butter sandwiches, like I knew my body handled that pretty well. M&Ms, peanut butter M&Ms, gummy bears, things that weren't, and I didn't do too much, so I never had any digestive issues, which is great. Which felt awesome throughout the whole race.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's pretty awesome, and talk about an accomplishment to boot. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So I guess we're gonna wrap this up here. I don't want to keep you going too long on here, but if there was anything that you could get out in the universe that you wanted people to know if they were just getting ready to embark on their fitness journey, what would be your number one word of advice?
Yeah, for me, it's learn how to operate at a place of self-love versus self-hate. And this will be a game changer for you. If you could learn how to do that now, be fulfilled with where you are now. And what I recommend is do a gratitude list every single day of what you're grateful for, 3 to 5 things that's going to help rewire your brain to look in the moment and be grateful for what you have now. Even though life's not perfect, even though your body's not perfect, even though you're not where you want to be yet, I promise you can still find things to be grateful for every single day, no matter how hard your life is. Start doing that every day consistently to help rewire your brain to see the things that are blessings in your life. as you continue to work on a better version of yourself. And then you'll be so much more fulfilled if and when you get that perfect body, or if and when you get that money, or that job that you're looking for. Like, you'll be fulfilled now instead of waiting until one day when I have this body, one day when I have this money, one day when my life is perfect, then I'll be happy. Because otherwise you look back and you just wasted a whole bunch of your life hating yourself, being at war with yourself, and never truly being happy.
I love that. That's just a great word of advice right
Mhm.
there. So tell my listeners where they can find you if they want to look you up. Obviously, you've got some books, you've got a podcast, social media. Where are some of the best places to find you?
Yeah, it's super simple. Fit2Fat2Fit is my website. It's my podcast. It's my first book. It's my social media handles. It's super simple. I try to make it as simple as possible for people to follow me. Just Fit2Fat2Fit.
Awesome. Well, I will put all that information in the show notes as well so that people can find you. And I'm so thankful that you decided to join me today. And I appreciate you spending time with us.
Yeah, thanks, Connie, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome.